At the center of our era sits one unspoken rule. White supremacy survives by perfecting the imaginary. It sells coherence when the symbolic disintegrates. It starts to pump harmony when politics crash. And Carl Jung, more than any other mascot fetish for covert white supremacy, gives this metaphysics its grammar. During a dinner with several psychoanalysts who make a living off of others' secrets, I mentioned that I had written an essay on attachment theory. Predictably, it drew them in. Therapists who depend on fragile ideas tend to react as if you told everyone their secret honeypot stash. One clinician smirked and said, "Well, you brought that on yourself." Then he leaned in. "But if you really want trouble, write about the body keeps the score." "Oh, I still value my peace," I said. "I don't need any more trauma in my diet." He laughed. Of course he laughed. People laugh when they want you to join the cult of suffering, where they've already engraved their names. The predictability of it all, the pieties, the nervous jokes, the way everyone depends on a theory to keep their own chaos in check. How different is it on Substack? Entire business models are built on telling you how to write, by not writing. Gurus teaching the art of the authentic sentence while never daring one. And just above them, above the smoke of the incense, floats the new self-appointed priesthood. Neo-Jungian mystic selling soft-focused salvation. This is the imaginary wing of white supremacy. The belief that the universe is fundamentally benevolent, that meaning is personal revelation, that suffering contains a secret message meant just for you. It is the foreclosure of history as violence, which allows the repackaging of classic brainwashing as spiritual depth. A spiritual pyramid scheme for people who still believe the universe leaves them little notes. How cute. I knew a Jungian once. His password was the Christian variant WWJD, he told me proudly. What would Jung do? What would Jung do? This is the for him edition of the neo-evangelical industrial complex, the matcha astrology pipeline pretending it's psychology. 2026 is just around the corner. Pantone has already released the new color of the year, Cloud Dancer, basically white, which, by the way, is not a color. It is the masquerading as neutrality, a preferred technique of the symbolic order that launders whiteness into clarity. A white so empty it borders on abstraction. It's supposed to represent clarity, renewal, optimism. Words chosen by a committee who have no contact with reality. A color selected for members in a gated community who prefer anesthesia to description. What is the color of genocide? What is the color of resistance? What is the color of solidarity? What is the color of empathy? Our era is one defined by precarity, but also the refusal to acknowledge it. When people lose the ability to name, they lose the ability to describe their own life. Psychosis rises exactly where language thins out. When words fail, hallucinations move in to occupy the vacancy. White supremacy thrives in this collapse. It steps neatly into the hole in the symbolic and fills it with myth, with purity, with archetype. The imaginary is installed as a replacement for meaning. This is how things unfold now, not only through crude violence, but through the slow corrosion of meaning, not through repression, but through the absence of any coherent vocabulary. In such a climate, Jung appears comforting, a mythology of benevolent forces, a universe with a plan, a self waiting to be discovered. The perfect theology for people after Nietzsche, for those who still want to believe that their suffering expresses something profound rather than something political. And Jung is one of those historic nodes where you can watch the imaginary infrastructure of white supremacy crystallize. The same signals that precede every revival of racial metaphysics, the hunger for complete symbols, cosmic confirmation, spiritual purity, bio-predetermination. These are the signals that always appear before political horror. The Jungian index shows the rising chatter of archetypes, cosmic messages, and personal crises, all recorded as destiny. Soft fascism has its own volatility curve, mapped in real time by its dog whistles, the replacement of longing with pure symbols, and the fantasy of a lost coherence. Make psychoanalysis Jungian again, they cry. Freud, meanwhile, gets reduced to a caricature. Mention his name and people will think of sex, misogyny, and penis envy. Hysteria, however, wasn't his invention. Hystera, the wandering womb, an entire century of male physicians who couldn't tolerate women's speech unless it was framed as pathology. In fact, it was Charcot who staged hysterics at the Salpêtrière, turning women into diagnostic spectacles. Freud entered that world trying, however imperfectly, to listen. But what survives from him in the public imagination is simply the image of an old man obsessed with sex. The cultural father who wouldn't stop talking about desire. Something in that triggers ressentiment. People hate the figure who tells them they are not masters of themselves. Psychoanalysis is in the business where its customers are always wrong. Beyond Charcot, there were others. Breuer, who, in working with Anna O, launched the talking cure, and even Fleiss. But what remains today are the original discoveries and, more importantly, their fragments, their failures that resisted commodification. These neo-Jungians, by contrast, smoothed by his Orientalist metaphysics into something infinitely marketable. The Jungians, the for him counterpart to the yoga girls, have perfected a particular performance. They slapped Freud and his Jewish science for being sex-obsessed, as though every accusation wasn't simply a refusal to deal with their own drives. These are the same men who will reveal how Freud makes them uncomfortable, but Jung will make them feel tall. In their rhetoric, you will find all the classic fascist binaries between spirit versus decadence, nature versus corruption, organic unity versus mechanistic fragmentation. Freud becomes the decadent city Jew, the figure upon whom every resentment can be projected. Freud becomes the racialized thinker that is framed as fragmented, conflicted, and lacking. The Swiss white metaphysician, on the other hand, sees coherence, unity, and essence. It's impressive the way this displacement still operates today. The way people accuse any critique of Zionism, of being anti-Semitic, are the same people who erase the critiques from prominent Jewish thinkers like Hannah Arendt, Albert Einstein, or contemporary Jewish scholars like Ilan Pappé or Norman Finkelstein. Direct anti-Semitism, of course, is out of fashion, but indirect anti-Semitism slides through the side door, cosplaying as spiritual preference. The contemporary Jungian would tell you to trust the universe. Lost your job? Hyperinflation due to capitalist contradiction. Trust the self. Trust that the cosmic message is one that only those who pay a subscription can decipher. You'll hear the same grammar in wellness culture, in manifest destiny narratives, in tech bro mysticism, where individuation is actually their portfolio strategy. That's why they make the big bucks. It's the same grammar you'll hear from neurolinguistic programming sales pitches, Zionist narratives of destiny, attachment theory influencers. The body keeps the score acolytes. The eugenicist selling you that gene data collection to make that perfect baby. The content differs, but the structure remains identical. What they all share is a universe without lack, a worldview that promises smoothness over conflict, an obsessional neurotic dream of completion. In this universe, Jung becomes the lighthouse, the fantasy of coherence in a world structured by conflict, the Orientalist fantasy that totalizes all religion as one, while understanding none. By the way, remember those human design people? Here I prefer the furries. At least their references are much more creative. Conflict? Oh, how vulgar. History? Too heavy. Politics? Low vibration. Fascist metaphysics attempts seduction through the same promise that if only you obey the deeper essence of race, spirit, soil, and destiny, you will become whole. Jung's version is much different. That if you obey the unconscious, you can become whole. But the real question is, who built the unconscious you are being asked to obey? Who manages it? Who gets access to it? Who decides what counts as its message? Who benefits when the unconscious becomes a spiritualized authority rather than a site of conflict? Once you understand that the unconscious is a site of conflict, not a sanctuary, then we can start making better predictions. Welcome to the new battlefield for your unconscious. It barely matters that Elon Musk struggles to hide his real reasons for why X is so important, or that Netflix has just acquired Warner Brothers. Observe the structure. Whoever controls the circulation of signifiers controls the field in which desire is formed. Even Hillary Clinton and former Obama speechwriter Sarah Hurwitz admit that they are losing the front on shaping the psychological programming of younger generations. The answer? The familiar paternalistic restriction of the youth to information. Why burn books when you can turn off the flow of information to the young? As if censorship could reverse a structural shift in the production of subjectivity? None of this is new. Germany understood the power of media long before Silicon Valley patented the insight. The Nazis captured the radio not because it produced the messages, but because it produced a unified reception, the fantasy of a single people hearing the same voice. Just as public relations is the department of ideology, information management is psychic warfare. This is where we circle back to Jung. The late Jung is the perfect mascot for this battalion. He offers the fantasy of imaginary identification, the small consolations of synchronicity, cosmic coherence, a benevolent universe where the self becomes destiny. You see the same enjoyment everywhere. The Hollywood films funded by the same war machine that has profited from deaths for decades. The spiritual optimism packaged for export. The belief that the universe is humming a private message into your ear while bodies pile up off screen. White supremacy survives through a fantasy of natural meaning. Blood, soil, destiny. Saussure ruined this fantasy by proving that meaning is arbitrary. It was not only a linguistic insight, it was an insult delivered directly to the heart of racial metaphysics. Jacobson deepened the injury with the simple fact that psychic life drifts and slides. Nothing is born whole. Nothing remains whole. Metaphor appears where the psyche wants unity. Metonymy appears when desire tears it apart. Fascism is a metaphor on steroids. Everything becomes an essence about purity, about the symbol of destiny. Freud, on the other hand, observes metonymy, the refusal of unity, the acceptance of drift, the insistence that meaning never closes. This is why Jung's mysticism is so politically convenient. It produces the fantasy that beneath the chaos of life and history, there is a secret order waiting to be discovered. Fascism loves this because it replaces politics with mythology, conflict with destiny, and history with archetype. Hence, the unconscious obsession with the non-human, the land that was promised to us, the need to mow the lawn, and the completion of perfection. And this is why Freud is scandalous. It's not about the sex. For Freud, libido was only the surface of a deeper problem. The actual shock of Freud was the claim that the ego is not the master in its own house. Unlike Jung, Freud insisted that the unconscious is not benevolent, not harmonious, not a reservoir of cosmic messages. It is abundantly clear now that the opposition to the wholesale slaughter of Palestinians, or of the Congolese, or of the Sudanese, or of East Timor, or the Muslims in Bosnia, has revealed something many preferred not to see: a profound distrust in democracy, and beneath it, the older hatred of the other who insists on history. Hollywood has been storyboarding the same fantasy from its conception. Remember Brad Pitt's World War Z? Where apparently the safest place on earth is Israel, where the occupiers is recast as the last refuge, the occupied erased into a faceless zombie swarm. And always remember, never ask why. Here, the psychic structure is similar to that of a joke, on which society has foreclosed its own violence, and the remainder, a bodily reaction from the suppression of psychic material. Something similar animated Jung's fear of ideology, collective movements, and the so-called mass man. Jung insisted salvation lay in the individual essence, untouched by politics. But whose essence counts? Indeed, not the essence of the racialized, of the other, of women, of the blacks, of the Orientals. Those in the zone of non-being. Those whose history is either sentimentalized or erased. Only the essence of the already powerful is allowed its metaphysics. The neo-Jungians repeat the same warnings with each updated branding. Technology will estrange us, and we should trust only the self. Every imaginary regime of whiteness must mask its material base. Meditation becomes a laundering of extraction. Astrology becomes a euphemism for structural privilege. Individuation becomes the spiritual cover story for domination. This spiritual libertarianism, the Californian ideal as psychological insight, is infantilizing. The idea that the path back to meaning is always a retreat inward. That's your trauma, your destiny, your private revaluation. It's giving eat, pray, love economy draped over a Verkish skeleton. Meanwhile, these same people will preach endlessly about inner harmony, especially as the world increasingly fractures. Oh, don't mind the noise. Tune back into your dantian and vibrate higher. Just don't forget to pay your monthly subscription. It demands obedience through spirituality without history, subjectivity without conflict. These cults can never tolerate the question why, because it exposes the inner structure. Why reveals beneficiaries. Why does history speak? Instead, they will demand you focus on how. How to regain dominance. How to optimize the self. How to look younger, eat more, and feel whole. How to turn spirituality into productivity, trauma into branding, suffering into subscriptions. This isn't 1930s Germany. This isn't your grandpa's fascism. How cringe. This fascism meditates. It meditates because whiteness must never appear violent. It must appear fated, serene, inevitable. The imaginary must do the killing silently. It journals about its destiny. It microdoses in the desert. It posts notes about synchronicity and that weekend course to turn your passion into a marketing course. But for whom? The fear, of course, is not about the etiology of trauma, but the collapse of the imaginary order that protects their fantasy. Naming Jung and its fascistic historical implications threatens the architecture. Back at the dinner table, they warned me, if you really want trouble, write about the body keeps the score. But the trouble starts already when one declares that Jung is not the cure for our crisis of meaning. Jung is simply one of the ways we're prepared to accept a soft, orientalist spiritual fascism. And if that sentence feels dangerous to you, ask yourself, who taught you that comfort is the ideal of the psyche? After all, it was Antigone that revealed the other side of the cancerous destruction of positivity. Theodor Adorno already understood what Jungian wellness refuses to acknowledge, that once spirituality becomes a market commodity, its purpose is no longer liberation, but obedience training. We can observe, just as Fanon did, that the same refusal of history is what underwrites every colonial massacre. If you're ever told to just trust the universe, while a genocide is live-streamed into oblivion, then you've already encountered the soft body of fascism, with its own gender division of labor. The women sell yoga retreats, vaginal-scented candles, and matcha vibrational healing, while the men meditate on individuation, and their portfolio consists of meme coins, weaponry, mining, and data extraction. Spirituality becomes the brave new world anesthetic. Depth psychology is the new brand identity. What psychoanalysis has discovered is that there is no harmonious unconscious, no benevolent universe, no myth that will save us. There is only conflict, history, and the cuts through which a subject is constituted. Zizek was right. Flowers should be forbidden to children. Innocence is the most dangerous fantasy of all. The imaginary is how white supremacy survives. It is time to refuse its flowers.
Way back when, before the grown-up phase, we're one best friend. It was easy going rogue. Life was anything but fair, but somehow we didn't care. Way back then, we saw all the movies on a big screen when we couldn't afford to pay the price. We snuck in through the back, hearts racing as the lights went black. Hold up, when did we grow up? When did dreams give way to plans? Wonder slip through our hands. Just hold up, just hold up. Way back now, I watched them in the yard and wonder how the world still feels that wide. Skinned knees and open skies, no fear behind their eyes. Hold up, when did we grow up? When did dreams give way to plans? Wonder slip through our heads. Just hold up, just hold up. I said hold up. Why did we grow up? When did we start moving so slow? Used to run, we used to glow. Hold up, said hold up. Hold up, when did we grow up? When did we start moving so slow? We used to run, we used to glow. Hold up, just hold up.